Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
My name is Harold Whitmore. I'm 73 years old, and for the past 4 years, I believe the greatest chapter of my life was being a grandfather. I had moved across 3 states to be close to my son Daniel, his wife Priya, and their 2 children, my grandchildren Lily and Sam. I sold the house I'd lived in for 31 years. I left my friends, my church, my routines, my garden. I did it without hesitation, without complaint, without condition. Because family, I had always believed, was the only architecture that mattered. I was wrong. Not about family, but about who counted as mine. The voicemail came on a Tuesday morning in October. I remember because the maple tree outside my apartment window had just turned the most extraordinary shade of copper, and I was standing there with my coffee, thinking how lucky I was. Thinking how full life still felt at 73, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the time, 6:47 a.m. Too early for Daniel, who slept until 8 on days he worked from home. I assumed it was my doctor's office calling about a routine appointment. I let it ring. When I finally played the message an hour later, I had to sit down before it finished. Priya's voice was flat, businesslike. The voice she used in her corporate presentations, I imagined, clipped and decisive with no room for negotiation. Harold, this is Priya. I wanted to call before things got awkward. We've been talking as a family, Daniel and I, and we feel like the current arrangement isn't working anymore. The kids are older now. Lily has after-school programs, Sam has his sports. They don't really need the pickups and drop-offs anymore. We've hired a full-time au pair who will handle everything. She moves in next week. You've been very helpful and we appreciate what you've done. But honestly, Harold, pack your bags. You're no longer needed. I think it's time you found something to do with your retirement. Maybe travel, maybe move closer to friends. We just think some distance would be good for everyone. Message ended there. No goodbye, no we love you. No acknowledgement of the thousands of hours I had poured into that family like water into dry earth. I sat in my armchair for a very long time. I want to be precise about what I felt because it wasn't just hurt. Hurt is simple, a bruise, a sting. What I felt was more like a building collapsing slowly inside me, floor by floor, each level of trust and love and sacrifice crumbling in sequence. I had driven Lily to her first day of kindergarten because Priya had a board meeting she couldn't miss. I had sat with Sam in the emergency room for 4 hours when he broke his wrist at 8 years old, holding his small hand and telling him stories about knights and dragons until the doctor came. I had cooked Sunday dinners, fixed leaking faucets, sat through 17 school plays and recitals and soccer games in the rain. I had done all of it not because I was needed, though it was nice to be needed, but because I loved those children the way you can only love someone who carries your blood and your hope forward into a future you won't fully see. And now I was being retired. Like a machine that had served its purpose, I called Daniel that afternoon. He answered on the third ring. Dad. His voice was careful, the voice of a man who had already agreed to something he wasn't entirely sure about. I got Priya's message, I said. I kept my voice steady. I had decided in those quiet hours of sitting that I would not cry on this call, I would not beg, I had my dignity even if it was all I had left. Dad, the kids are just getting more independent, it's a natural transition. She said I'm no longer needed, Daniel. A pause. She didn't mean it like that. How did she mean it? Another pause, longer. I could hear him breathing, could almost hear him choosing his words the way you choose which path to take through a minefield. We just think you might be happier with more of your own life. You've been so focused on us, on the kids. Maybe it's time to. I sold my house, I said quietly. I left everything. I moved here because you asked me to, because you said the kids needed me, because you said you needed me. I know, Dad, and we're grateful, grateful. That word landed like a stone in still water. Grateful was what you said to a serviceman who'd fixed your appliances. Grateful was the word you used when the relationship was over and you were trying to close it cleanly. I see, I said. I'll let you go, Daniel. Give my love to the children. I hung up before he could answer. For 3 days, I didn't leave my apartment. I ate crackers and soup. I watched old films, the kind from the 40s and 50s where everyone was dignified and no one said anything they didn't mean. I grieved honestly and privately the way old men grieve, quietly without performance, understanding that the world does not stop to observe your pain. On the fourth day, I called my oldest friend, a man named George Beaumont, who lived in Asheville, North Carolina. George and I had been friends since 1974. He had been at my wedding. He had flown in when my wife Eleanor passed 12 years ago. He was the kind of friend who required no explanation, no preamble, no context setting. I said, George, I'm thinking about selling my apartment and moving, and he said, about time. I've got a guest room and a bourbon collection that needs a worthy adversary. That phone call changed something in me. Not fixed, grief doesn't get fixed, it gets carried differently over time. But changed, shifted. A door long closed, opening just a crack to let in a little light. I called a real estate agent the next morning. The apartment sold faster than I expected. The market in that part of Connecticut was favorable and my unit was well maintained and on a high floor with good light. Within 6 weeks I had an offer I was satisfied with. Within 10 weeks I had signed the papers. Within 12 weeks I had packed everything that mattered: Eleanor's photographs, my father's watch, my books, my garden tools that I'd been keeping in storage out of stubbornness and hope, into a moving truck headed south. I didn't tell Daniel until the week before I left. I sent him a letter handwritten on proper stationery the way Eleanor had taught me. Not because I wanted to wound him with the formality of it, but because I wanted the words to be permanent. I wanted him to be able to hold them. Daniel, I've sold the apartment. I'm moving to Asheville to be near George and to start the next chapter of my life. I want you to know that I hold no bitterness toward you and I pray none toward Priya. I love you. I love Lily and Sam more than I have words for, and that will never change. But I have learned something these past weeks that I should have known earlier. A man cannot make himself the foundation of someone else's house and then be surprised when they build around him and eventually wall him out. I made myself too available, too selfless, too willing to disappear into your family's needs. That was my choice and I own it. But I'm 73, not 103, and I have life left to live. I will always be your father. I will always be their grandfather. But from now on, I will also be myself. With love, Dad. I don't know how long he sat with that letter before he called me. It was 3 days. When he did call, he was crying, not the controlled, careful tears of a man performing emotion, but the ragged, ugly weeping of someone who had realized, too late, the weight of what he had allowed to happen. Dad, I'm sorry. I should have Priya. I should have stood up for you. I should have told her she was wrong. I said simply, you should have. I come see you, before you leave. Of course, I said. You're always welcome wherever I am. That's what it means to be family. He came the following Saturday alone. We sat at my kitchen table, mostly packed and bare around us, and we drank coffee and talked for 4 hours. Really talked, the way fathers and sons sometimes can't manage until the pretenses fall away and there's nothing left to protect. He told me things about his marriage I hadn't known. I told him things about my loneliness since a leaner died that I'd never said aloud. By the end of it, we were both hollowed out and somehow cleaner for it, the way a forest looks after rain. He helped me carry the last boxes to the truck. At the door, he hugged me the way he hadn't hugged me since he was a teenager, hard and long, his face pressed into my shoulder. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. Always have, always will. Asheville in November is something close to magic. The mountains hold the last of the autumn color longer than anywhere I've ever lived, and the town itself has a particular quality of light in the late afternoon, gold and generous, as if the sun is reluctant to leave. I moved into a small craftsman house 3 streets from George with a front porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs and a backyard that was pure, blank, promising soil. I planted a garden in the spring. Tomatoes and herbs and a rose bush in Alina's memory. She had loved roses, the old-fashioned kind that smell like roses are supposed to smell, before they were engineered for looks at the expense of everything else. I joined a woodworking class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to do and never made time for. I started attending a church with a congregation that was warm and not too large, where the minister told stories rather than gave lectures, and where they had coffee hour afterward that went on for nearly 2 hours because nobody seemed to be in any particular hurry. I made friends. Real ones, the kind you make in your 70s, which are different from younger friendships because everyone involved knows what time it is. There is no pretense in friendships made this late in life. There is no performing. A woman named Ruth, who was 70, had lost her husband 2 years prior and had a laugh that could fill a room. A retired professor named Marcus who had more opinions about literature than anyone I'd ever met and argued every one of them joyfully. George, of course, dear, steady George, who showed up at my door twice a week for bourbon and backgammon and the easy silence of a 50-year friendship. I was happy. Not the borrowed happiness I'd been wearing for 4 years, the happiness of being useful to someone else's life, my own happiness, the kind that comes from inside, from knowing who you are and choosing each day to keep being him. Lily called me in March. She was 12 and had found my number in her father's phone and called without telling her parents. Her voice was uncertain at first, then rushed, then tearful. Grandpa, why did you move away? Did we do something wrong? I closed my eyes for a moment. 12 years old and carrying something that wasn't hers to carry. No, sweetheart, I said and meant it completely. You and Sam did nothing wrong, not one thing. Do you understand me? Then why? Because sometimes grown-ups need to make changes. But listen to me carefully, Lily. I love you exactly as much as I always have. More maybe because I'm prouder of you every year. And I will always, always be your grandfather. That part never changes. Will you come visit? I'll come for your birthday, I said. I promise. Grandpa, yes, I miss you. I miss you too, my love. I miss you every single day. I went back in June for Lily's birthday as promised and for Sam's a month later. I stayed in a hotel not out of hostility but out of the new geometry of things, the proper distances that keep relationships honest. Priya was polite in the careful way of someone who knows they behaved badly and hasn't yet decided how to address it. I was gracious not because I owed her grace but because withholding it would have cost me more than it cost her. On the last evening, as I was saying goodbye to the children in the driveway, Priya came out. Daniel stood in the doorway watching. Harold, she said. Priya. She looked at her hands for a moment, then up at me. I wasn't kind to you. What I said, it wasn't right. I waited. I was going through something and I handled it badly and you paid for it. That wasn't fair. I said, it was. I'm sorry. Words were small and plainly spoken. No theater, no excess. I respected her more for that than if she'd wept and decorated the apology with explanations. I appreciate that, I said. Truly. I shook her hand. I hugged my grandchildren. I clapped Daniel on the shoulder and held it there for a moment, the way fathers do when they're saying something words can't quite reach. Then I drove away, back to my hotel, and the next morning I drove to the airport and flew home to Asheville, to my garden and my porch and my friends and my life. The real, full, particular life that was mine and nobody else's. Leaner used to say that a person is like a tree. If you bend too far in one direction for too long, you either break or you must straighten. I had bent so far for so long toward other people's light that I'd nearly forgotten I had my own. But here is what I know now in my 73rd year, sitting on my porch in the mountains with a cup of coffee and the whole improbable beauty of a May morning laid out before me. It is never too late to stand up straight. It is never too late to sell the house, whatever your house is, and start again. It is never too late to be at last entirely yourself. The maple trees here in Asheville are older than I am. In October, they turn a color I don't have a word for, somewhere between copper and fire and the last warm light before dark. I watch them from this porch and I think of a leaner who would have loved this place. I think of Lily and Sam, who will visit me here next Thanksgiving and sleep in the guest rooms I've already painted for them. I think of Daniel, who calls every Sunday now, regular as church bells, and with whom I have built from the wreckage of a hard year something more honest than what we had before. I think of the voicemail. "Pack your bags, Grandpa. You're no longer needed." She wasn't entirely wrong. I packed my bags, I went somewhere wonderful, and as for being needed, I've learned, finally, that a man's worth was never meant to be measured in what others required of him. It was always, always meant to be measured in how fully he dared to live. Harold Whitmore, age 73, Asheville, NC.